It is a joyous feeling to write a book. It is a really wonderful feeling to have written that first book because it feels like something you never thought you could do. And so to finally do that and get that under my belt gave me tremendous confidence. It was just an act of perseverance and belief. And, come on, I write every day. It was just one of those things where if you're going to change your future, you got to sit down and do something that's going to terrify you a little bit. For me, that was writing a book.
Welcome to the Thought Leader Revolution with Nikki Ballou. Join the revolution. There's never been a better time in history to speak your truth, find your freedom, and make your fortune. Each week, we interview the world's top thought leaders and learn the secrets of how they built a 6 to 7 figure practice. This episode has been brought to you by eCircleacademy.com, the proven system to add 6 to 7 figures a year to your thought leader practice.
Welcome to another exciting episode of the podcast, The Thought Leader Revolution. I'm your host, Nikki Ballou, and boy, do we have an exciting guest lined up for you today. Today's guest is one of my favorite writers. This is a man who's a prolific author. He's written a ton of cool books on his own, and he's also teamed up with a legendary TV personality to write what's probably the best-selling nonfiction historical book series of all time, The Killing Series. I am speaking, of course, of none other than the one, the only, the legendary Martin Dugard. Welcome to the show, Martin.
Nikki, it is great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on the show. So, Martin, tell us your backstory. How'd you get to be the great Martin Dugard?
I like that. I'm going to tell my wife you said that, so see how she reacts to that. I'm just one of those guys who I took my time getting through college. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and I would skip class a lot. I'd take a book and a couple beers and go down to 6th Street in Newport and sit on the sand and read and wonder what I wanted to do with my life. And at some point, I thought I might want to be a writer. But I remember my mom, when I was about 6, told me that, I told her the same thing. And she said, don't be silly. Writers don't make any money. So I banished that thought from my head. And all those years later, I was married. I had a really crummy corporate job, cubicle life. And I would come home and complain about it every day. And my wife finally said, just do something about it. So I took a flyer on, doing some magazine articles, and one thing led to another. I started doing them for nothing, 50 words for an article. And, after a few years, I worked my way up to the Esquires and the GQs and the outside magazines and Sports Illustrated. And then out of the blue, one day when I was at my corporate job, which I used as my writing office, nobody I dealt with in New York knew that I was working out of a cubicle in Irvine, California. I got a call from a guy named Mark Burnett, who later became famous for Survivor and all those shows. At the time, Mark didn't have 2 pennies to rub together, but he was trying to fund a team to go do a 2-week adventure race through the wilds of Madagascar. Alligators in the rivers, intense heat, complete jungle isolation. And he said he would pay my way to Madagascar because he'd read one of my articles, and he thought I was the perfect guy to cover his team. So he was legit. He was going to pay my way and make sure I was taken care of. And I had to go to my boss and ask for 3 weeks off to fly halfway around the world to Madagascar. Wow. And I had a great time, and there were crocodiles in the rivers. We'd sit in the river during the day, waiting for teams to come through the checkpoints. And, it was so hot. They would sit there with our notebooks, just kind of holding them above the water so we could write while the rest of our body was submerged in the water. But at night, if you shone a headlamp out on those same waters at night, you just see crocodiles looking back at you, kind of reflecting off of it. So it was,
wow.
It was the adventure of my life. Let's put it that way. And the whole way home on the flight, I wondered how I could ever go back to the corporate world after having that, life-changing experience. Luckily for me, I didn't have that problem because my boss fired me the first day back. Took me to a restaurant, bought me lunch, fired me, and I was the happiest guy in the world. And I went home, I told my wife, I said, hey, I got fired today. She goes, what are we going to do? I said, I want to try to make it as a writer. And she thought about it for a second. She goes, all right, I support you. We're all in, but you can't be looking at the one ends. You can't be looking at other jobs. If you're going to do this, you have to go full tilt. And that was February 1994. And here we are 31 years later.
Wow. That is a heck of a story, and there's a lot to unpack in there. So let's start by talking about having your wife's support. How important was that in giving you the confidence you needed to actually make a go of this?
To be honest, Nikki, if I knew what a bad writer I was at that time, I never would have attempted to do that. I thought I was great. And looking back at some of that early stuff, it was just, he wasn't amateurish. I was getting paid to write, but I wasn't somebody who was going to write books for a living. It was just, I wasn't that guy, but my wife had complete faith in me. And, and we didn't, it wasn't just the two of us. We had two young kids at the time. So it
Wow.
wasn't a matter of, us just taking a flyer on it and saying, this is so cool. It was like, hey man, we got to find a way to make this work. And that means financially. And so it was a lot of hustling for a long time, but she never backed down.
A lot of people don't realize how important it is to have your partner in life be all in on your dreams, because if you've got somebody who's not all in on your dreams, it makes it almost impossible to actually go out there and make it happen, right?
Totally. You think about it. I mean, you live with this person, you sleep next to them, you eat with them, you interact with them all day long. If they don't believe in you, you're gonna feel it. You're gonna know it, and it's gonna kind of undermine your goals and what you're attempting to do. And on the other hand, if even when things are hard, if that person looks at you and says, I believe in you, or at one point, my wife, I remember I was sitting down and she came and kind of sat and actually literally sat on my lap. She put her arms around my neck and she said, please tell me this is going to work out. And I said, I don't know how, I don't know what's going to transpire, but just trust me, this is going to work. And she's always been there.
That's incredible. Um, and here's the other thing I wanted to unpack. You talked about how when you were young, 6 years old, you told your mom you wanted to be a writer, and she said, don't be silly, writers don't make any money. So you parked that dream for a number of years. And your mom meant well. Your mom wanted the best for you. She wanted you to do something that was going to result in you being solvent and a good contributing member of society. 100% that's what she intended. Yet, how many times do the well-meaning people in our lives tell us things that end up snuffing out that little spark of a vision, of a dream? And I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about that, especially some of the folks here who might have kids that are listening to us. When their kids come to them with their outlandish dreams, what's the right answer on how to interact with that dream? Because I think there's a better answer than don't be silly. Writers or fill in the blank don't make any money, right?
Well, like you said, my mom meant very well. Nobody wants to see their child condemned to a life of poverty because they have an artistic calling that may or may not work out. But with my own kids, I've got three boys. They're all, in their 20s and 30s now. I never, they do different things. One's a Navy pilot, one works at Disneyland, and one is a video game designer. I didn't know where they were going to go or what they were going to do. I just wanted to be there for them, and I'm sure at one point or another I said something really profoundly stupid to them. I mean, it's just the way of parenting. You just never know. You never know what you say is going to get remembered. I mean, the fact that I remember that 6-year-old conversation with my mother, she probably never realized that that single sentence that she uttered was going to stay in my brain for the rest of my life. So you never know what you're going to say, but I can only say that from my own experience, the times I've really screwed up and said something negative or silly, that's the stuff that my kids have remembered. They don't remember all the times I said, you're wonderful, give me a hug, I love you.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I get that. It's funny you talk about that as being one thing that's stuck in your brain. You know, a few months ago, I had the privilege of interviewing Brian Tracy, who's one of the all-time personal development writers
Hmm.
He wrote a lot of famous books. He wrote Eat That Frog. He wrote a
Oh,
book called Goals that sold a gazillion copies. And he's gone and he's spoken all over the world in front of like millions of people. And when I had him on the show, there was one thing he said that stuck with me ever since. He said a lot of brilliant things, but he said one thing to me. He said, Nikki, if you go through life and you look at everything that happens, and the filter that you use is this is happening for me, not to me, you're going to have a much happier life and a lot more great things are going to come your way. And I remember hearing that and I'm going, oh yeah, for me, not to me. So whatever happens, this is the filter I'm using now. For me, not to me. You know, like guy cuts me off in traffic, for me, not to me. Maybe if he hadn't cut me off in traffic, I'd have gone into a pothole and broken my car axle or something like that. And I got to tell you, ever since that happened, I'm finding myself way happier. I'm finding I'm making more money, which is, you know, as an entrepreneur, that's always a wonderful thing. And I'm also finding that I'm fighting less with the people around me because where in the past I'd want to like put my dukes up and go, "Arr!" Now I'm saying, wait a minute, this is happening for me, not to me. So there's no reason to fight about it. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to take some of these things that are said to us that are positive and have it rattle around in your brain too, I thought.
no, I think that's wonderful. I mean, it's, I had a, not too long ago, like 3 months ago, was some guy pulled into my lane, like literally, and his car died right in front of me. And I slammed into the back of him, and, the whole front end of my car was destroyed. Um, and it was one of those things where I was really mad at the guy. I was devastated about my car. I was glad I was alive. The airbag deployed. But at the same time, when I got to the end of it, I thought I can be bitter about this. I can be really angry about this guy, or I can just be thankful that I survived the car crash. I came out of it with my limbs intact, and it was one of those things where I feel like if you take negative moments in life, if you like you flip some guy off, you've just let that person into your life for the rest of your life. And so instead of letting somebody zoom past you, even if they've cut you off, and you can find a way to take a breath and just say, it's happening for me, not to me, you're going to be fine. But I think once you start doing things like, you got to go around the guy and try to find a way to cut him off or whatever, they're in your head and in your life forever. And it's just bad juju. I'd rather be upbeat and positive and forget about, let that moment go. Forget about it and move on and find something more positive to fill that headspace.
Amen. Amen. So, Martin, you started off writing articles for magazines. When did you write your first book? And walk us through the process of how that came into being.
Uh, Funny story. Okay, so I began writing magazine stuff like I want to say 87 or so, maybe 88, no, 87. And like I said, little short pieces. By about 1990, like 5 or 6 years later, I got a call from Sports Illustrated, and they wanted to do a children's book. It was Sports Illustrated for Kids was one of their magazines, and they wanted to do 4 adventure stories. And I've got the book here. It's like, it's not big. The whole thing is probably 20,000 words. So we're maybe even less. But that was the first time I'd written anything more than 1,500 words at a time. And it kind of planted the seed in my head that I could possibly write an entire book. And so I waited a couple of years, kind of, kept doing the magazine thing. And, my kids were getting bigger. I want to say by about 96, 97, my kids were, 6 and 4. And I couldn't, I was on the road all the time. And the only way I could find to really change my career and stay at home more often was to write a book. So I literally wrote a book on spec. It was called Surviving the Toughest Race on Earth. It was about that adventure race I went to in Madagascar. And I wrote about it, and I wrote it all the way through. Then I rewrote it, and it felt like I was kind of cheating on my career because I had to do that at the same time I was writing magazine articles.
Sure.
And I sent it to my agent at the time, and it was rejected 21 times. And then finally, I got an acceptance. And one thing led to another. It got published. It sold okay, but but it led to another book, and it led to a better agent. And, I kind of started working my way up the food chain. And so it was just an act of perseverance and belief. And, come on, I write every day. It was just one of those things where if you're going to change your future, you got to sit down and do something that's going to terrify you a little bit. And for me, that was writing a book.
Wow, that's pretty darn awesome. So, um, that first book sounds like it was a massive leap out of your comfort zone. Would that be fair to say?
Yes. But at the same time, I think we all know at some point in our careers, unless you're the individual who works in a static position, that you're happy with your job, this is what you're going to do for the rest of your life, and you don't want to do anything else, that's fine. But I was writing, and it just felt like a natural evolution. I started writing 50-word magazine articles to get going. Then I got up to, 1,000, then 1,500. Then I did that Sports Illustrated book, and it felt like the next step for me was to, make the leap and write an entire book. And it was every, I'm kind of jaded because I write books for a living. I've written, dozens. But
Yep.
I know that feeling when you see people on Instagram or Facebook saying, "Hey, I wrote my first book. Here's my new book." It is a joyous feeling to write a book. It is a really wonderful feeling to have written that first book, because it feels like something you never thought you could do. And so to finally do that and get that under my belt gave me tremendous confidence.
Yeah, I'll bet it did. I mean, I've written a bunch of books. They've all been self-published. I've not gone down the agent route. I tried at one point many years ago. That's a whole story for another time. With a famous Olympic athlete here in Canada who was an Olympic champion, and we even had an offer from Penguin Books at the time. But at the last minute, his financial demands went from reasonable to extremely unreasonable, and the book deal fell apart. But the first time I wrote a book, it was a 30-page book, and it was a book designed to help sell me as a business coach, and I didn't actually sell the book. What I did with that book is I handed it out to prospective clients, and I handed out 5,000 copies of that book to people. And then once in a while, someone would call me and say, "Hey, you're a decent speaker. Come speak for us. We can't pay you, but if you got books, you can sell books to the audience." And then I'd bring 100 books, 200 books. I'd sell a few copies that way. But the first time someone gave me money for one of my books was one of the greatest feelings of my life. It was $10, my God, But I was just like, I leapt for joy. I'm a paid author. I'm being paid to write. This is the greatest thing in the world. So I can totally appreciate what you're saying. One of the books on your list that I haven't read, but I'd really like to read, is To Be a Runner. My sweetheart is a runner. She's run 23 marathons, and she's run 12 hours on a treadmill 3 times to set Guinness World Records. So I actually think I should buy her a copy of this book too. But tell me about this book. It sounds almost like a self-help type book. Is it?
No, it's not. So my story is that I ran high school and college track and cross country, and afterwards I did the marathon, triathlon, ultramarathon, adventure racing route. And now for the last 20 years, I've been coaching high school distance runners. At the local high school, I coach cross country and track, and I still do a little bit of running for myself. I'm not the I can't just pop out the door for a 10-miler like I used to, but I still put a little bit in. Anyway, about 15 years ago, I had a little time on my hands, and I just challenged myself to write. It's To Be a Runner is a book of essays. It's not. It's really more about different aspects of the running life. And so I challenged myself to write for 1 month, write an essay per day. And then I went back and I cleaned all of them up. I made them better and polished. And it's funny enough, my agent and I had a long-standing joke that I would never, ever attempt to sell a running book. And so I sent him the entire manuscript. I literally took the entire book. I wrapped it in a red ribbon. I put it in a box. So I printed the whole thing out, wrapped it up, put it in a box and FedEx to him. And I said, look, read it. If you don't like it, throw it away. We'll never talk about it again. But if you do like it, let's see if we can sell it. And so I wrote it, and it's a fun book. Because sometimes when you write in memoir, it becomes a little time capsule of your life.
Sure.
So when I look back at that book now, it's me, 15 years ago. It was the way I was thinking at the time, my thoughts. And this is actually before the whole Killing series. So it's just one of those things where it's great vignettes about the running life. And hopefully it's a little bit transformational to people, but it's something, again, it's one of those books that's not really commercial, but that I had to write just for me. And I did.
I think a lot of people who are runners themselves would find it interesting. I think I'm going to buy it and give it as a gift to my sweetheart. I think she'll enjoy it very much.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it sounds like fun. So you mentioned the Killing series. Good segue into that. How did all that come about? How did you get introduced to the ineffable Bill O'Reilly?
Well, actually, the story goes that I was actually with my cross country team. We were up in Mammoth, up in the mountains, Sierra Nevada, and we were having a high altitude training camp. And I got a call from my agent in New York, and at the time, Bill was his client as well. And he said, I've got a client that would like to meet with you. He wants to have lunch with you in New York to talk about potentially doing a book together. And he didn't tell me who it was, but at the time, the publishing industry was collapsing. This is 2008. This is after, the economy imploded, and I needed work. So I got in my truck in the middle of the night, and I drove to Reno and got on a plane. Ended up in New York City. I went to lunch, and of course, Bill was the client. And he's a tall guy. He's like 6'3", 6'4".
Yeah.
He eye contact guy. We sat down in the middle of this midtown restaurant, just the two of us. Then my agent joined us, but the whole time during dinner, during lunch, Bill's just making direct eye contact with me and kind of checking me out. And then I got the job. And so that led to Killing Lincoln, which was the first, and that's done the best. But you're right, it is the best-selling nonfiction series in publishing history. So, so it's done really well. We did 14 books together, and we just wrapped up with Confronting the Presidents, which is the last in the thing. And I've gone back to a solo career myself, just as it just felt like it was time. But they were fun books to write. It's nice to write a book and have it go to number one on the New York Times list and stay there for 26 weeks. It's a good feeling.
I'll bet that's pretty supercalifragilistic fantastic, right?
Yeah, I should have, for a time there, Killing Kennedy was the second book, and there was a period there where Killing Kennedy and Killing Lincoln were 1 and 2 on the list. And part of me wanted to frame that just to have it, but I make a practice of not trying to live in the past. So I treasure that memory, but at the same time, that shouldn't define me. So I don't have anything like that hanging on my wall.
I got to tell you, I totally understand that. But putting on my personal branding coach hat on, Martin, are you kidding me? Get that thing on your wall right away. Do some social media posts with it. You can get rid of it later, but come on, let's get some business going here.
I'm not good at self-marketing, so
there's a lot of this is very interesting that you say that. A lot of my clients are wonderful human beings with superb skills at what they do. And that's exactly what they tell me. Some version of what you just said. I'm not good at self-marketing. I'm not good at selling. I find it distasteful, whatever. And I love those people. And it is my honor and my pleasure to always help them reframe how they look at it so they can actually get a lot more moolah coming in because they deserve it. It's a beautiful thing. But, I've read most of the Killing books. I haven't read the Confronting the Presidents one yet, but Killing Kennedy and Killing Patton are probably my two favorites from that series. I found them both quite riveting. Killing Reagan, I found very interesting. Some of what you guys say in that book is a little bit controversial, right? There's people who, shall we say, disagree with your take on things in that book.
Yeah, but I think if you're not pissing people off a little bit, you're just not doing your job. I mean, you at least want to make people think.
Yeah,
And
sure.
and and I, by the way, I beg Bill not to do. I'm looking at the books right now. So it went Lincoln, Kennedy, Jesus, Patton. Then we went right to Reagan before Rising Sun, and I
Yeah,
really wanted to do Rising Sun first, and Bill was like, "No, we got to do Reagan." It was like almost like we had to get past it,
yeah,
um, and it was just because Reagan's a tough one.
yeah.
He wasn't actually murdered, he wasn't killed. That was the theme
No,
of the series, but at the same time, there was cognitive decline in a second term, and we present theories as to why that happened.
sure.
But boy, you should have seen the pushback we got. We had some of the most powerful people in America, names you would know, really, really angry. They're really angry.
I know. I saw Bill bring on George Will onto his program, and George Will tried to tear a strip off Bill. It didn't go well for George. Nobody
Yeah,
trying to tear a strip off Bill ever goes well for them because he's a tough dude. But wow, I was shocked, and there was a lot of people talking about it on other programs,
yeah.
and yeah, they were not happy, not at all, not at
Yeah.
all.
I don't, we could back everything up, and that's the thing about these books is the research is so intense and so involved, and it's not like we just pull things out of the sky. It's
Sure.
like everything is so grounded and everything is so factual. When people challenge us, we always have something to back us up. But sometimes we live in a world where it's that the big lie that Hitler came up with in what was his book he wrote, where basically if you want to tell a lie, make it a big lie and keep repeating it over and over and over. Sooner or later people will believe it. So some of that disinformation from that book, Mein Kampf, it
Yeah,
felt like
unco-
people were just trying to challenge us just because to push their own agenda. And
sure.
I get it. That's what people do. Um, but sometimes it's hard to duck when those shots are coming and they're making it very personal. That's tough.
Yeah, no kidding. So, which is your favorite book of the Killing series?
Like I said, I'm looking at them. I can tell you one by one. I really enjoyed Lincoln. Kennedy was a tough one to write just because that kind of falls into. I was a young kid when he got shot, but I still remember it. Jesus was tough because Jesus is about the crucifixion. I grew up as a Catholic. It's just one of those books where when you know the facts of the crucifixion and the context of the Gospels, it was a horror. The crucifixion was horrible. Patton I absolutely loved because I got to do some World War II stuff for the first time and go to some of the. I went to Fort Driant, which if you read the book, Fort Driant, Patton was trying to take the town of Metz, but the Germans held this fortress overlooking the city that was impregnable, and we finally took it. It took a long time, and so I had to see the place for myself. So I went to Metz. My
Wow.
wife and I took the train, rented a car. We drove up into the hills, and I'd done enough research to know roughly where it stood. But there was a bunch. It was in a forest now. It was surrounded by barbed wire, but I finally found it, and I was so happy. I went inside, and I literally went inside the facility. It's pristine. You would think by now it'd be someplace there'd be a bunch of graffiti or broken bottles, but it was pristine. I went inside. I got up on the roof. It was an underground bunker, and I got back home and told that story at a book signing. And this guy raised his hand. He goes, "Who was your guide?" And I said, "Nope, found it myself. Did all the work." He said, "There's unexploded ordnance all around that place." So
What?
I had no idea that I was, near all these landmines and stuff. So got lucky on that one.
No, did you ever? God was
So,
looking out for you, my friend.
and I also went to the room where Patton died in. It was a U.S. Army hospital, and I got to go there. So Patton, I liked Reagan. We talked about Rising Sun was difficult because I didn't know the war in the Pacific that well. England was eye opening because again it's American history, kind of telling it. Most people think the American Revolution was a very short struggle. It was a long war. It took
It
a long
was
time.
almost a
Killing,
decade, right?
yeah, and and it's weird to think of it now, but they would just stop fighting in the winter. That's why when Washington attacked the Hessians at Trenton, it was a big deal because they thought they were done for the winter. It's like it's snowing, we're going to stop fighting, and then he did that. Killing the SS is traumatic just because I had to really go into all the Holocaust stuff. Killing the mob was kind of fun, like a Bonnie and Clyde kind of fun.
Yeah.
Killing the killers was intense because I got to talk to people at the highest level in national security off the record, and I learned a lot of stuff about what's going on in the world. And then let's see, killing the legends. I didn't really care for that book just because it felt like we were trying to find a story, but a lot of people tell me they like it a lot because it's
I
run.
like that book. That's a good book. I enjoyed it. The stories of Elvis Presley and Muhammad Ali, and in particular, the parallel you drew between their Svengali type gurus
Yeah.
who guided / used and abused them at the same time. It was eerie how similar they were.
Yeah, Bill's good for finding that thread. Bill's got a good sense of story, and as we begin, he not like we kind of come into these books with only a vague idea what the story is, and then that's where the research comes in. And once we found out that those Svengali type people were so much a part of the downfall of these people, I mean, that became the story. It wasn't really the story of the careers of the people; it became the people who tried to kill them.
William F. Buckley wrote a book about Elvis. It was a fictional book, but based on a lot of factual data as well, called Elvis in the Morning. And in that book, you could really also see how Colonel Tom Parker really used and abused Elvis. And Elvis would have probably been alive today if he didn't have Tom Parker pushing him to go perform when he was
Yeah,
on drugs and just physically not up to it. And if he had someone around him who actually cared about him, he would have gotten him into rehab rather than saying, "Nah, don't say anything to Elvis. Let's just keep making money from the cash cow."
that was the thing too. Is like you would think Colonel Tom Parker would take the long view. Like let's make sure Elvis stays alive. If we really want to make money off this guy, let's make sure he's around for 50 years instead of around for 10 more. So
Yeah,
that was chilling. I was blown away by how much Elvis ate in the last few years. I mean, these huge peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and all these, I mean, just enormous amounts of calories.
yeah, yeah. It's well, he wasn't looking after himself. That's for darn sure in any way, shape, or form.
He wasn't going to the gym as much as he should have.
No, no. So, what did you think of Killing the Witches?
Oh, I forgot about that one. You know what? I'd had some stuff going on in my own life. So for the start of Killing the Witches, I wasn't there for the beginning. I told Bill, find somebody else. I really, my wife had some health issues, so I stepped away for a bit. And about halfway through, Bill called me and he said, yeah, I need some help. Can you come back in and fix this book? And so I came in for it. It was unusual because it was supposed to all be about just the witches, the Salem witches, and then we kind of ran out of witches after 130 pages, and then we had to kind of shift the story. But I will say this: that's when it got creepy for me because when you deal with the occult and the paranormal, it's one thing to think about the Salem witch trials. And by the way, we are still very much a nation that that core group of people in Salem and New England at the time, that's still very much part of our national mentality. And it's really weird to write that story and see how it still applies today in many ways. But then when we got to the crazy stuff like the Exorcist stuff, which apparently was very real, that's
Wow.
kind of mind blowing. And when you spend all day writing that, it stays with you, you know, long after you're done writing for the day. You kind of, it's in your dreams. It starts to
Wow.
kind of form your. It's crazy stuff.
Yeah, it was a little crazy to read. And what about Killing Crazy Horse?
Okay, that I want to say, like it's right up here with Patton and the reason I like Crazy Horse is because it was very balanced. We didn't say the U.S. is good and the Indians are bad. We didn't say that the Indians are wonderful and the U.S. is bad. But we do go through the whole land grab that brought all this stuff about. But my favorite. Um, there's a massacre that takes place, and Crazy Horse himself is a big part of it, and it takes place in Wyoming. And doing my research for the book, I flew in. I was going to spend the day at the Little Bighorn and then go on to this battlefield. And so, and I'd studied both battlefields, and so I kind of knew what I was looking at. But this massacre I'm talking about, basically, Crazy Horse led 80 U.S. cavalry officers into a trap, and the Indians rose up around them and killed everybody. And then the women came out and hacked their brains out and cut off their privates. But I went, and because I'd studied, I walked that battlefield, and it's one thing to read about, the cavalry guys going down this ridge line and the Indians coming up from nowhere, but to walk in their exact footsteps and realize that the ridge line is only about 100 yards wide. So I I was just walking this thing, visualizing being one of the soldiers that long ago, and realizing all of a sudden that they were completely screwed. They had no place to go. It was an ingenious ambush, and to participate that and to go back to the place that was originally their fort and see how the whole thing came. It was the most vivid battlefield experience I've ever had.
And the final book in the series, The Confronting the Presidents, it's the only one without killing in the title.
Well, that's a new series, and there's we did that, and then there's a new one called Confronting Evil that I'm not part of, and that comes out in September.
Okay.
But Confronting the Presidents was a long book. It took usually we write books in 5 to 6 months. It's a daily process. That one took about 7 or 8 months, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. But people say they like it, and so that's really all that matters. If they're going to read the book and give it a good rating, that's a good thing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I haven't read that one yet. It's actually coming through. I'm a BillO'Reilly.com concierge member, so I get a free book a year, and
Oh,
this is the one that's coming to me this year. So I'm excited. I'll tell you, the first book I read of yours that was yours and not a collaboration with Bill O'Reilly was Farther Than Any Man, The Rise and Fall of Captain James Cook. And this book to me read like a thriller novel. I was able to finish it in 3 days. And it's not a tiny book, right? It's not a tiny
yeah,
book at all.
it's
So
80,000. Yeah.
yeah, what made you interested in Captain James Cook?
Um, I did a book in 1999. There was a big sailing tragedy down in Australia. There's a big blue water race. They're called the Sydney to Hobart race, and a bunch of sailors died one year, and I flew down to Australia to interview other sailors who had sailed that day and to talk about the race and what happened. And it was like a triple cyclone hitting the fleet. It was horrible. Anyway, I was struck by the fact that all of these sailors I talked to, and these guys are like really great sailors, and they all mention Captain Cook, and as being like this amazing sailor, and I knew Captain Cook is where we get Captain James T. Kirk from the USS Enterprise.
Yep.
It's farther boldly go where no man has gone before is a paraphrase of Captain Cook's what is it? I will go farther than any man. So it's kind of the same thing. So I was fascinated. But one of the reasons I selfishly enjoy writing books is that I get to travel to the places that I'm researching. And I had never been to Australia other than when I wrote the Knockdown book. And so it brought me back to Australia. Then I got to go to the other places around, like Whitby and various islands, and actually the place where he died in Kealakekua Bay in Hawaii, I actually went there and walked in his footsteps as he went up to greet the Hawaiians who had angered him, and then they basically, and their house is still there. If it's in the jungle, but it's these houses made of volcanic stuff, and then they kill him, they hack up his body, and then so I retraced his steps back into the water, and so to make a long story short, it's a very shallow bay for about 75 yards, and then it drops off from like 8 feet of water to 5,000 feet of water. And
Whoa.
so as you swim out, and I was just trying to check this whole thing. All of a sudden, it's like jumping off the Grand Canyon, because all of a sudden you go from shallow water to an abyss that you can't see the bottom. And I've later been told that that's where the tiger sharks live. So
Whoa.
I, I got out of there.
You love like courting danger, don't you, pal?
I'm just trying to check stuff out. So anyway, the thing about Captain Cook is, and you said it read like a thriller, is as long as I'm a big history guy, I've been, and what I hate is that most history is written to be academic and boring and too much information and too much detail and no attempt whatsoever to make you turn the pages. And so Farther Than Any Man was my first attempt to write a history book, the first ever, and I tried to write it in a way that would make people turn the pages. And
Wow.
so that's the style I used when I began writing Killing Lincoln, and that's the style I used throughout the whole Killing series. I would write the books. I would research the books. I would write the books. I would send them to Bill. Bill would rewrite them in his voice, and then when we get on the phone and combine his book and my book. But all the storytelling, that whole way I'm trying to keep you turning the pages as quickly as possible. And so, like with my own series now, the Taking series, which has been Taking Paris, Taking Berlin, Taking London, and now Taking Midway, which is a new book we're talking about.
Yep.
They're all, I've tried to get more and more cinematic, more and more in depth. I mean, you're not going to lack for detail and historical strength, but I want it to be a book people take to the beach or a book people read on a plane, knowing that they're not going to fall asleep after 2 pages, but they're going to want to keep on reading and reading and reading.
Well, I tell you what, Martin, I'm a voracious reader. I read over 100 books a year, and I have for the longest time. I think I've read close to 5,000 books in my lifetime.
Wow.
And I'm going to take a deep dive into your work. I mean, I've read the Killing books. I read the James Cook book, and I thought, man, this man can write. So let's start. I'm gonna order the Taking books. I'm gonna order your other books. I'm just gonna go deep into Martin Dugard's work, because you're a great writer. You're a fabulous storyteller, and I think more and more people should know about your work, and not just the work that you've done with Bill O'Reilly, although the work you've done with Bill O'Reilly is fantastic. So we like to end off each one of these episodes by asking you, as our guest expert, what are your top 3 expert action steps? These are your 3 best pieces of life or professional advice in bullet point form that you want my listener to take into his or her life. What say you?
It's real simple. My 3 guiding principles: be present, be grateful, and do hard things. And if that guides everything I do. And so when I'm spending too much time on my phone, I remind myself to put it down and be in the moment with my family and my wife. I find it's kind of like what we said earlier. If I live a life of gratitude, even when I'm having a tough writing day, I'm going to say, you know what? I'm stronger because I've done this writing. It's going to help me solve literary problems in a much more in-depth way in the future. And, then do hard things is, I find as I get older, the tendency with the people around me is to say, we've done hard things our whole life. Now we're just going to take it easy and we're going to go get a job at Home Depot. My whole thing is like, how can I top what I've done? Like I feel very happy with the work I've done throughout my whole life as a writer, but there are things I haven't done. I haven't written a novel. I'd love to write a really good novel. And to me, that's a hard thing. It's a form that I've never tried to attack. It's stuff like that. I want to keep finding ways to challenge myself. I ran marathons for a number of years, but to now, one of my hard things is just getting out the door, just to make sure I run every day. Just even if it's only 2 miles, it's better than, you say in your head, it's like, oh, it's only 2 miles. What difference is it going to make? Well, if I'm spending the time that I would spend on those 2 miles, sitting on my butt someplace or just kind of killing time, it's a challenge sometimes to push yourself into being uncomfortable.
I love all three of these. Be present is so important in this age of social media and smartphones because it's so easy not to be present.
Yeah.
Be grateful. I mean, being alive and above ground is amazing. It's just absolutely amazing. So
Very true.
wild. Cool things are happening. And do hard things is the way to move forward. I'm 57 and I'll be 58 in a couple of months. When I was 55 years old, I was quite a bit overweight. I used to be a top fitness coach. And I started gaining about 5 to 10 pounds a year for about a dozen years. And every year I told myself, you know what, you're a trainer, you know what to do, you'll get it done this year. And every year I got a little fatter until February 2nd, 2023. I have my shirt off, I'm staring at myself in the mirror and my gut's hanging out over my pants and my belt. And I just was utterly disgusted with myself, angry with myself. And I just said, you know what? Screw this. This is the year, and you're not going to do it on your own. You're not a trainer anymore. You need a trainer. So I went and found a guy who worked with people in my age range and put them on bodybuilding stages. Long story short is I lost 58 pounds in 6 months out of working with him.
Wow.
But I wasn't happy with my body shape. Like it wasn't symmetrical, and larger legs, smaller upper body, et cetera, et cetera. So I told him, let's keep working. Let's reshape me so I have a symmetrical body. And I did a bodybuilding competition at 57 last year, just a day before my 57th birthday. And then after that, he said to me, at the age of 60, you can go get your IFBB, International Federation of Bodybuilding, professional card. I said, but I don't want to be a professional bodybuilder. He says, no. But to get good enough to get your card, you got to do a whole lot of hard things, as you put it, to get yourself ready. So that means you got to eat a certain way. You got to keep working with me. You got to work out. You got to get your sleep in. And it took me all of 3 seconds to just say, F it, I'm in. Let's go. And that was August 15th of last year. And I'm not doing a competition now. I'm actually eating to bulk up, to put on muscle. It's way harder than eating to lose, to just trim fat off. That actually, at the time, I thought it was brutally hard. But now looking back, I go, that was actually easy. Are you kidding me? This is tough. Because there's days I get up and I have to eat a certain amount of food. And I'm tired. I fall asleep. And I wake up at like 10 o'clock at night going, I didn't eat my final meal. I get up, go cook it, go eat it, go back to bed, and all that kind of stuff. And I think doing hard things is super, super important. You talk about writing a novel. I wrote a novel a few years ago. I had a novelist on my show. Have you heard of Jeff Hopf? Do you know that name? So
what does he write?
He writes post-apocalyptic fiction. He's an I think he's an ex-Marine. He fought in Desert Storm back in the day. And he's also a very successful entrepreneur. He's very famous for this poem that he wrote that Donald Trump Jr. quoted and then went hyper viral. You probably heard the poem. It goes something like this: hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. Have you heard this poem before?
No, that's good.
He wrote it. Donald Trump Jr. posted it. It went viral. The whole world knows it. Half the world loves him, half the world hates him. That's the way of the world these days. But anyways, he sold millions of his books, and he came on my show years ago, and he encouraged me to write my novel. So I wrote it. And I'll be perfectly candid with you. The story's good, but it's terribly written from my point of view. Okay, like it's terribly written compared to the novels of, the novelists I admire and I read, because I read a lot of novelists' work. It's terribly written, but I'm glad I wrote it. It's one of the things I want to fix it up a little bit, and he's told me he's going to help me out, and he said I might even come in with you and put my name on it. We'll do it together, which would be fantastic. But it's one of those things that right now is out of my comfort zone, because I do a lot of writing right now, but it's business writing, right? Professional writing. I write for my podcast. I write stuff for clients. And the last several books I've written have all been either business books or political books, and all of that good stuff. And doing a hard thing, getting out of my comfort zone day to day is super important. And my new comfort zone is now I'm training. So time to add the writing back in, time to go back to that novel, dust it off, rewrite, draft. I did 3 drafts, trying for draft 4. Let's get it going and see what we can do. So I really appreciate these 3 principles that you live your life by. These will be our expert action steps, and they're fantastic. So Martin, how do people find out about your books, buy your books? Where do you want us to send them to?
Okay, so the new book is Taking Midway. It's about the Battle of Midway. Came out about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Oh, cool.
It's a good book. It's a fun read. It's exciting. You can go to martindugard.com is my website, and it'll point you to all my books. But I'm on Amazon. I'm in, all the bookstores. I think my Instagram is like at Martin Dugard or something. I have author Martin Dugard. My assistant takes care of that. But yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Twitter or X. I kind of wish I wasn't on X anymore. I started doom scrolling, and I can't tear it away.
You gotta stop that. It's crazy. Yeah, I've done that too. It's not good. It's not good. It's all negative stuff too. God, can really get you going after a while. Yeah. We'll make sure that we put all that in the show notes. MartinDugard.com. I've been on that website. It's a great website. Check it out, folks. I'm going to go buy Martin's book list, the entire book list. I'm going to just go through it. I'll probably spend a good chunk of the rest of this year and next year reading his books. That's what I do. I just obsess on the works of an author. Right now, I'm kind of obsessing on the novelist Donald Westlake. Do you remember him?
Oh my gosh, I loved him. He was fantastic.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So I've got about so far this year, I've read about 7 of his books. I've got another 8 that I bought from the used bookstore that sells mystery books, and I'm planning on reading 30 of his books at least this year, because he's written something like 80 or 90 books. I don't know that I can get through all of those in a year, but
he was phenomenal. He was funny too.
He really is. Oh my God, the Dortmunder books were just hilarious. They just make me laugh. Yeah. So good. Yeah. The one I'm reading right now is called Smoke, and it's about this thief who accidentally becomes invisible, and the whole comic story around that, how it's both a boon to his robbery business because he can go into places and steal things and not get seen, but it's terrible for his love life because his girlfriend can't see him and she's freaking out and wants to dump him. So.
That's funny.
Yeah,
I'm reading. There's this guy. I like John le Carré a lot. I like James Salter.
Yeah,
but when I really want to unwind and not be some kind of think too much author, I read a lot of the Mark Greaney.
I love Mark Greaney. Gray Man books are awesome. They're amazing.
I love them. I read them and I reread them. They're so good.
They're great. He was writing some of Tom Clancy's books for a while.
I heard that. Yeah.
And then when the Gray Man books took off, he stopped doing that. Another guy who co-wrote a couple of books with Clancy, and right now has taken over writing the Vince Flynn series, is Don Bentley. And I've had Don on my show a couple of times.
Yeah.
He's a good dude. His own books are the Matt Drake books, but the Vince Flynn, Mitch Rapp series is some cool stuff that he's done. But this is, do you know Don?
No, I don't. It's funny. Everybody thinks all of us authors know each other. We know each other's books. We read each other's books, but we're all solitary creatures. And so, I mean, I'm sitting in my office right now. It is in my garage. I rarely, my whole life is my garage and where I go for a run. And so I'm not a social creature at all.
I totally understand. Don's a really great guy, and his books are fantastic. Supercalifragilistic. Well, that's awesome. So, first of all, Martin, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciated getting to know you and your works, and thanks for sharing your wisdom about life and about writing with me and with my listeners, I should say. And your 3 expert action steps are 3 of the best that I've ever heard. They're pithy, they're short, they're sweet, they're on point, and I thank you for that.
Oh, my pleasure. I stole it from somebody else, so it's I don't take all the credit.
We don't call that stealing. We call it R&Ding, rip off and duplicating.
You know what? That's what good advice is all about. That
It truly is. It truly is. It truly is. All right, folks, and that wraps up another exciting episode of the podcast, The Thought Leader Revolution. To find out more about today's amazing guest, the one and only Martin Dugard, go to the show notes at thethoughtleaderrevolution.com or wherever you happen to listen to this episode, be it iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube, Rumble, or what have you. Until next time, goodbye.
This episode has been brought to you by eCircleAcademy.com, the proven system to add 6 to 7 figures a year to your thought leader practice.